It was a quiet evening when the sound of an old motorcycle faded into the distance, leaving behind only the soft hum of a jukebox and the low chatter inside a dusty roadside bar. The bar was small and rough-looking, a place where truckers, bikers, and tired travelers came to escape the world for a while. The wooden floor creaked under heavy boots, cigarette smoke floated lazily in the air, and the smell of cheap beer mixed with the sharp scent of motor oil. That night, everyone noticed when she walked in. A woman, young, quiet, and clearly not from around there. Her name was Emily. She wore a simple leather jacket and carried a small backpack, her jeans dusty from the road. Her hair was tied back, and her eyes, though tired, carried something steady, something unshaken. She looked like someone who had traveled far, not just in miles, but in life. The moment she stepped through the door, the room's mood shifted. Conversations softened. Heads turned. In a place full of rough men who lived by their own rules, a woman walking in alone was rare and dangerous. Still, she didn't flinch. She walked straight to the counter, sat on a stool, and quietly asked the bartender for a glass of water. The bartender, a big man with a kind face, raised an eyebrow but said nothing. He poured her the drink and slid it across the counter. She nodded in thanks, then sat quietly, staring at her reflection in the glass. She wasn't afraid, but she wasn't careless either. She knew exactly where she was. A biker bar on the edge of nowhere, where respect had to be earned, and weakness was never forgiven. A few tables away, a group of bikers laughed loudly, slamming their bottles together. One of them, a tall man with long hair and a rough beard, noticed Emily. His name was Rex, leader of the local biker gang called the Iron Fangs. He had a reputation, short temper, long list of enemies, and zero patience for strangers who didn't show fear. He leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing as he watched her. Well, he said to his crew with a smirk. Look what wandered in. Lost little bird, maybe? His friends chuckled, some whispering things under their breath. Emily didn't react. She just kept sipping her water, her eyes calm, her face unreadable. That calmness made Rex more curious. Most people looked away when he stared at them. Most people tried to avoid trouble. But this woman, she didn't even seem to notice him. That silence, that confidence, it almost felt like a challenge. Rex stood up slowly and walked toward her, the wooden floor echoing with each heavy step. The room quieted again, everyone pretending not to look but watching anyway. Emily didn't turn around. She knew he was coming, could feel the weight of his presence. Still, she didn't move. He stopped beside her stool and leaned close. You lost, sweetheart? He asked, his voice low and mocking. Emily looked up, meeting his eyes. No, she said simply. Just passing through. Her tone was calm, almost polite, but it carried something firm. Something that told him she wasn't easily intimidated. Rex grinned, showing yellowed teeth. This ain't a place for passing through, he said. It's a place for people who belong. He motioned to the others, who laughed again. Emily didn't respond. She turned back to her drink, ignoring him completely. The silence stretched. The tension thickened. The bartender wiped a glass nervously, pretending not to hear. A few of the older bikers exchanged uneasy looks. Something about Emily's composure felt wrong. Not weak, not scared, just controlled, like someone who'd seen worse than any of them could imagine. Rex didn't like being ignored. He placed his hand roughly on the counter, leaning in closer. Hey, he said, voice sharp now. I'm talking to you. Emily finally turned to face him again. Her gaze was calm, but her eyes were cold. And I heard you, she said. But I didn't think you were saying anything worth answering. A few gasps broke the silence. The air in the room grew thick. Rex's grin faded, replaced with a tight jaw and dark glare. No one ever talked to him like that. Not here, not ever. He stepped back slightly, staring at her as if deciding what to do next. Emily, however, just turned back to her drink, unfazed. She didn't raise her voice, didn't threaten, didn't explain herself. That quiet strength, that refusal to show fear, made her seem even more mysterious. Outside, Thunder rolled in the distance. The neon sign above the bar flickered. Inside, the bikers whispered among themselves. Who was she? Where did she come from? Why wasn't she scared? Rex sat back down at his table, eyes still on her. We'll see, he muttered to himself, taking another sip of beer. Let's see who you really are. Emily finished her drink, placed a few crumpled bills on the counter, and looked around briefly. The eyes that followed her were filled with curiosity, confusion, and a touch of unease. No one quite understood it yet, but something about her, the quiet fire in her eyes, had already begun to change the atmosphere of the whole place. She wasn't just another stranger in a biker bar. She was a storm walking calmly through thunder. And soon they'd all find out why. The next evening came quickly, and the bar was alive again with loud music, clinking bottles, and the smell of smoke and fried food. The same faces filled the place. Bikers with leather jackets, laughter that sounded more like growls, and the same neon lights blinking in the window. But there was something different in the air. Everyone was still talking about the woman from last night, the one who had walked in alone and stood up to Rex, their leader, without even raising her voice. No one had ever done that before. Most people avoided Rex like he was a storm about to break. But Emily, she had looked him straight in the eyes and didn't flinch. That small act had shaken his pride, and everyone knew it. Rex sat at his usual table that night, a bottle in his hand, his mind stuck on her face. He replayed the moment over and over. Her calm voice, her steady eyes. It had made him feel something he didn't like, weakness. He was used to people showing fear, apologizing, doing whatever it took to avoid trouble. But she didn't. She made him feel small in front of his own gang, and that was something he couldn't forget. When the sound of the door opening echoed through the room, Rex's head turned sharply. The laughter stopped for a second. And there she was again, Emily, wearing the same leather jacket, calm as ever, like nothing had happened. She walked to the bar, nodded to the bartender, and asked for coffee this time instead of water. The whispers started immediately. She came back? One biker muttered. She's got guts, another said quietly, but others shook their heads. Or maybe she's just stupid, someone snorted. Rex's lips curled into a grin, but there was no humor in it. Looks like the bird came back, he said, standing up slowly. His friends watched with anticipation. They knew that look. Rex wasn't going to let her walk out untouched this time. He walked toward her again, his boots heavy on the wooden floor. The jukebox song faded into the background as silence filled the room. Emily didn't move. She sipped her coffee, eyes on the cup, as though she didn't even notice him coming closer. Well, look who it is, Rex said, stopping behind her. Didn't think I'd see you here again. Emily turned slightly, meeting his gaze with that same steady calmness. It's a free place, isn't it? She said softly. Or do you own the road too? A few people snickered, trying not to laugh out loud. Rex's face tightened. He leaned closer. You've got a smart mouth for someone who doesn't know where she's standing. She looked at him quietly for a moment, then said, I know exactly where I'm standing. The way she said it, calm, almost kind, made it sound even sharper. Rex's temper flared. He slammed his hand on the counter, making the glasses rattle. You think you can talk to me like that? He shouted. You're in my place now. The bartender froze, unsure what to do. The rest of the bar fell completely silent. Even the music stopped. Emily didn't even blink. I didn't come here to talk to you, she said. But you keep coming to me. Why's that? That made Rex pause. He hated how she twisted his words, how she stayed in control while he lost his. It made him furious, not because of what she said, but because of how calm she stayed while he was burning with anger. Let's see, Rex said slowly, his voice turning cruel. Let's see who can save you now. Before anyone could react, he reached out and grabbed her shoulder roughly, spinning her around. The sound of tearing fabric filled the air as he yanked her jacket, the edge of her shirt ripping open. Gasps broke out across the room. Emily stumbled back slightly but didn't cry out. She looked at him, not in fear, but with cold disappointment. Her shirt had torn enough to reveal the top part of a massive tattoo on her chest. The head of a fierce eagle, its wings stretching wide, inked in deep black and gold. For a few seconds, nobody moved. Even Rex froze, his hands still half raised. The sight of that tattoo hit him harder than a punch. It wasn't the kind of tattoo you got for fun. There was something powerful, almost sacred, about it. The old biker sitting in the corner leaned forward, his eyes wide. "No way," he whispered. "That's the eagle mark." Rex frowned. "What?" The old man looked pale. "It's not just a tattoo. It's a symbol, a military one. Belongs to a rescue squad from the army. Only the ones who've seen real war wear that mark." A murmur spread through the room like fire. Eyes shifted from Rex to Emily and then back again. Emily didn't say a word. She pulled the torn edge of her shirt back together and straightened her jacket calmly. The silence was heavy now. No laughter, no mocking, just the sound of the ceiling fan spinning slowly above. Rex stepped back, suddenly unsure. He tried to hide it with anger, but his voice came out quieter this time. "What are you, some kind of soldier?" Emily looked him in the eyes. "Not anymore," she said softly. "But I've seen what real danger looks like. You're not it." Her words cut through the room like a knife. The bikers who had laughed earlier now looked away. The old man nodded slowly, his face full of respect. Rex didn't know what to say. His pride was broken. His anger felt useless now. For the first time, he realized that this woman wasn't someone to mess with. She wasn't just passing through. She was carrying a story no one there could ever understand. Emily placed a few coins on the counter, picked up her bag, and turned to leave. As she walked past Rex, she said quietly, "You should think before you try to humiliate someone. You never know who you're standing in front of." She walked out into the night, the cool wind brushing against her torn shirt. Behind her, the bar stayed silent, the men who had once laughed now sitting still, unsure of what they had just witnessed. And in Rex's mind, one thought echoed again and again. "Let's see who can save you now." He had said it to mock her. But now, he wasn't sure who had really needed saving that night, her or him. For a few long seconds, the bar was frozen. Nobody spoke, nobody moved. The only sound came from the ceiling fan spinning slowly above and the faint crackle of the jukebox that had stopped mid-song. The torn edge of Emily's shirt fluttered slightly as she stood there, unmoving, her eyes locked on Rex. The silence was so deep that everyone could hear the faint clink of a bottle being set down somewhere in the back. The eagle tattoo on her chest gleamed under the yellow light, dark ink, bold lines, and a piercing gaze that seemed alive. It wasn't some random design. The wings spread wide across her collarbone, powerful and sharp, and the head of the eagle looked fierce, like it could leap off her skin at any moment. The bar full of bikers, men who prided themselves on toughness and tattoos, suddenly looked small. Rex's hand, which had just ripped her shirt, now hung frozen in the air. He hadn't expected this. He wanted to embarrass her, to make her feel weak, but instead, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: shame. The way she looked at him wasn't angry. It was calm, almost pitying, and that made it worse. No one dared to laugh or whisper now. The air had changed completely. One of the older bikers sitting near the jukebox leaned forward, squinting at the tattoo as if he was trying to remember something. Then his eyes went wide. He whispered, That's not just any tattoo." Everyone turned toward him, but he kept staring at Emily. "I've seen that mark before," he said slowly. "Years ago, during my time in the army. That eagle belongs to a special rescue unit, the kind that goes into war zones when no one else will." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some of the men looked at each other with disbelief. Others just stared at Emily, whose calm expression never changed. Rex finally lowered his hand, but his jaw tightened. He didn't like being the one confused. "You expect us to believe that?" he said, his voice trying to sound tough again. "You think a tattoo makes you special?" Emily took a slow breath, her tone quiet but steady. "No, the tattoo doesn't make me special. What I did to earn it does." The words hung in the air like thunder after lightning. The bar fell completely silent again. Her calm voice, her quiet strength. It all made Rex feel smaller by the second. He tried to shake it off. "You think you can walk in here and act like you're better than everyone?" he said, stepping closer. "You don't belong here." Emily turned fully to face him. Her shirt was torn, but she didn't try to hide it anymore. The tattoo seemed to shine under the dim light as she stood tall and proud. "I don't belong anywhere," she said softly. "That's the thing about people who've been through real hell. The world never feels like home after that." Her words hit everyone in the room like a wave. Some of the younger bikers looked down, feeling something they couldn't quite explain. Respect, maybe, or guilt. The bartender, who had been frozen behind the counter, looked at her with quiet admiration. Rex opened his mouth to speak again, but no words came. The arrogance that had filled him moments ago had vanished. His mind was racing. Who was this woman? A soldier? A medic? Someone who had seen death up close? He wanted to say something tough, but deep inside, he knew there was nothing he could say that wouldn't make him look smaller. Emily slowly reached for her torn jacket and slipped it back on. Not in a rush, not afraid. Every small movement she made showed control. Control over herself, over the moment, over the room full of men who had thought they were untouchable. Finally, she looked back at Rex. "You thought tearing my shirt would scare me," she said quietly. "But you can't humiliate someone who's already faced death and kept walking." The words cut deeper than a blade. Rex blinked, his throat tight. No one had ever talked to him like that before. Not with anger, but with truth. And the truth was something he wasn't ready to face. Behind him, one of his own gang members muttered, "She's right, man." Another nodded silently. Rex turned sharply toward them, his eyes filled with warning. But it was too late. The power he used to hold in that room had shifted. Emily turned to the bartender and placed a few coins on the counter. "For the coffee," she said simply. Then she looked around the bar one last time, meeting the eyes of the men who had mocked her just moments before. None of them could hold her gaze. When she started walking toward the door, the sound of her boots on the wooden floor was the only sound in the entire bar. No one dared to stop her. No one said a word. Even Rex didn't move. Just before she reached the door, she paused. Without turning around, she said, "Respect is not about fear. It's about knowing what people have survived to still be standing." Then she pushed the door open and stepped out into the cool night air. The neon sign flickered above her as she walked to her motorcycle parked outside. The wind caught her hair, the moonlight shining faintly on the edge of the eagle tattoo still visible through the tear in her shirt. She put on her helmet, started the engine, and drove off into the dark road, leaving behind a bar full of men who didn't know what to say or think anymore. Inside, Rex sank back into his chair, his hands trembling slightly. The same men who once cheered him on now sat in silence. The laughter was gone, replaced by a heavy feeling none of them could describe. The old biker finally spoke up. "That woman," he said quietly. "She's seen things none of us ever will. And that eagle, that's not just ink. That's a story written in scars." No one disagreed. They all just sat there, staring at the door where she had just walked out. The same woman they thought they could mock had turned out to be stronger than all of them combined. And for the first time in years, Rex didn't feel like the toughest man in the room. He just felt small and silent. The night after Emily left, the bar didn't feel the same. The laughter that used to shake the walls had turned quiet. The jukebox played softly, but no one was really listening. Everyone kept glancing at the door, as if expecting her to walk in again. But she didn't. The image of her standing there, calm, unshaken, with that fierce eagle tattoo shining under the light, was burned into everyone's mind. Rex sat alone in his corner, staring at the bottle in front of him. He hadn't said much since that night. The words she spoke echoed inside his head again and again. You can't humiliate someone who's already faced death and kept walking. Every time he tried to forget it, the memory came back sharper. He couldn't stop thinking about the tattoo either. That eagle. It wasn't like the usual bar tattoos of skulls and flames. It had power, like it meant something deep, something earned, not just inked. and the way everyone reacted to it, even the toughest men in the room, it made Rex curious. He wanted to know who she really was. A few of his men sat nearby, whispering about her. "You think she really was a soldier?" one said quietly. "Old Joe swears it's true," another replied. Said he saw that symbol in the army, a rescue unit, elite stuff. They go where nobody else can. Rex looked up sharply. Rescue unit? Joe, the oldest biker in the gang, nodded slowly. His wrinkled hands wrapped around his beer glass. "Yeah, I was stationed overseas years back. Those Eagles, they belong to medics, not fighters. But don't get fooled by that. They were tougher than most soldiers I knew. They'd go into burning zones, pick up wounded men under fire, patch them up, and carry them out alive. That tattoo, it's a badge of survival. You don't earn it unless you've saved lives in the middle of hell." The room went silent again. Every eye turned toward Joe. He looked at Rex and said quietly, "You picked the wrong person to mess with, son. That woman's probably seen things that would break most men." Rex didn't answer. He just stared at his reflection in the bottle. His own tattoos suddenly felt meaningless, just symbols of rebellion, not bravery. He had spent his life trying to look tough, but she was tough. Not because of muscles or violence, but because of what she carried inside her, the kind of strength that doesn't show until it's tested. The more he thought about it, the smaller he felt. The words he had thrown at her, "Let's see who can save you now," now sounded stupid and hollow. He had said it to scare her, but instead, she had stood there and made him question who he really was. Joe leaned back in his chair. "That eagle," he continued, "it's not just for decoration. Each part of that tattoo has meaning. The wings stand for freedom, for people who face danger but still choose compassion. The claws, they represent protection, defending those who can't defend themselves. And the head, always facing forward, means courage. No matter how dark it gets, they don't turn away." The men listened quietly. For once, there were no jokes, no laughter. They just sat there, realizing that they had tried to humiliate a person who had probably saved lives, maybe even people like them. Rex felt a strange heaviness in his chest. He had always been the kind of man who thought power came from fear, that being the loudest, strongest, and most feared meant respect. But now he understood something different. Emily hadn't raised her voice once, yet she had made every single man in that bar freeze. Her silence had more power than his shouting ever did. Later that night, after everyone left, Rex stayed behind. The bartender wiped the counter and said softly, "You thinking about her?" Rex nodded without looking up. "She didn't even fight back," he said quietly. "Didn't have to." The bartender smiled sadly. "That's what real strength looks like. You just hadn't seen it before." Rex didn't reply. He sat there for a long time, lost in thought. He remembered the look in Emily's eyes, calm, steady, almost sad. It wasn't anger. It was like she had seen this kind of cruelty before, too many times to care anymore. Maybe she had walked into that bar knowing exactly what would happen, and maybe she let it happen just to teach them something. Outside, the night was cold and quiet. The moon hung low over the empty road where Emily had ridden away. Rex stepped outside and looked at the horizon, wondering where she was now. Somewhere out there, Emily was probably riding alone on her bike, the wind against her face, her thoughts far away. She didn't hate Rex or the others. She pitied them. She knew what fear looked like in a man's eyes, and she had seen plenty of it in war. Compared to that, the bar incident was nothing. But still, she hoped that maybe, just maybe, her presence had changed something in them. Inside the bar, her story started spreading. People talked about her like a legend, the woman with the eagle tattoo who made a whole room of bikers fall silent. Some said she was a soldier. Others said she was a medic. A few believed she was something more, a survivor who carried the pain of many lives on her skin. Rex came back every night after that, but he never laughed the same way again. The cruel spark in his eyes was gone. He didn't touch anyone without respect. He didn't yell for attention. The words she spoke had settled somewhere deep inside him. And though Emily never returned, her presence stayed in that place. The men stopped mocking strangers. They started treating people differently. The eagle tattoo had done what no fight or threat ever could. It had brought silence, reflection, and a kind of respect none of them knew they were capable of feeling. That night, when the bar finally closed, Rex looked once more at the empty stool where Emily had sat. The torn piece of her shirt still lay there, caught on a nail in the counter. He picked it up, folded it carefully, and put it in his pocket. He didn't know why, maybe guilt, maybe respect, but he knew one thing for sure. That woman had left something behind, something invisible yet powerful. And from that night on, every time he looked at his own tattoos, he didn't see rebellion anymore. He saw ink, just ink, because now he knew what a real mark of strength looked like. The next evening, the sky was red with sunset when Emily rode into town again. Her motorcycle's low rumble echoed through the quiet streets. She hadn't planned to come back, but something inside her told her she wasn't done yet. Maybe it was unfinished business, or maybe she just wanted to see if people like Rex could truly change. The bar's neon sign glowed faintly in the distance, flickering like a heartbeat. Inside, things were calmer than before. The loud laughter and shouting were gone. The same faces were there, but they looked different, quieter, thoughtful. Rex sat at his usual table, staring at an untouched drink. When Emily walked in, the door creaked, and the room froze again, just like the first time. But this time, the silence wasn't filled with mockery. It was filled with respect. Everyone turned their heads slowly. Some nodded at her politely, while others looked down, ashamed of how they had behaved that night. The bartender gave her a small smile, one that said more than words. Emily nodded back and took the same seat as before. Rex's eyes followed her. For a moment, he didn't know what to do. The memory of tearing her shirt burned inside him like a wound that wouldn't heal. He got up slowly and walked toward her. But unlike last time, his steps were heavy with guilt, not pride. Emily looked up at him calmly. "You again," she said softly. Rex stopped a few feet away. "Yeah," he said, voice low. "Me again." He hesitated, his hands clenched at his sides. "You shouldn't have come back here. Not after what I did." She looked at him for a long moment before replying. "If I stayed away from every place where someone tried to break me, I'd have nowhere left to go." Those words hit Rex hard. He lowered his eyes. "I didn't know," he said quietly. "About the tattoo. About you." Emily took a sip of her coffee, her eyes still calm. "You didn't need to know," she said. "You just needed to know what respect means." The bar stayed silent. Everyone listened, pretending not to. Even the jukebox seemed to pause between songs. Rex looked up again. His voice was rough but honest. "I was wrong. I thought strength meant making people fear me. But when you stood there that night, I realized I've never been strong. I've just been angry." Emily studied his face. For the first time, she saw something real in his eyes. Not ego, not cruelty, but regret. "Anger can build walls," she said quietly. "But it can't make you respected. Fear fades fast, Rex. Respect lasts." He nodded slowly, as if each word hurt. "You changed this place, you know," he said. "Since that night, no one's the same. I'm not the same." She gave a faint smile. "Maybe it's not me," she said. "Maybe you just needed a mirror to see who you really were." Rex exhaled deeply, then sat down across from her. "That tattoo," he said hesitantly. "It means something big, doesn't it? I keep thinking about it." Emily looked down for a moment, her hand resting near the torn edge of her old jacket. "It's not just a tattoo," she said softly. "It's a memory, a painful one." She paused, her eyes distant. "It's from the rescue team I was part of. We went into war zones to pull people out. Soldiers, villagers, anyone trapped. Some days we saved lives. Some days we couldn't. Every feather on that eagle's wing represents someone who didn't make it home." The bar fell into a deep silence. A few men lowered their heads. Even Rex looked shaken. Emily continued, her voice steady but heavy. "I got this tattoo after my last mission. My team didn't come back. I was the only one who survived. That eagle isn't about pride. It's about carrying their spirits with me. Every day, it reminds me that I'm still alive because of them. Rex swallowed hard. I thought it was just a mark, he said softly. I didn't know it carried all that. Emily gave a small smile, sad but proud. That's the thing about scars. The world only sees the surface. They never see the story underneath. For the first time, Rex didn't try to act tough. He nodded quietly, his eyes wet with emotion he didn't try to hide. I'm sorry, he said simply, for what I did, for how I treated you. Emily leaned back slightly. Sorry doesn't erase what happened, she said, but it's a start. He looked around at his gang, who were all listening silently now. You taught me something that night, he said. Strength isn't about how loud you are, or how many people you can scare. It's about what you've been through, and how you carry it. Emily nodded. Exactly. Real strength is quiet. It doesn't need to prove itself. The bartender, wiping a glass nearby, added softly, she's right. You boys always thought power came from fighting. But sometimes, power looks like peace. Rex smiled faintly. Peace, he repeated, as if the word was new to him. Never thought I'd find it in a bar. Emily stood up, placing some money on the counter again. You found it because you were willing to look, she said. Rex stood too. If you ever need anything, he said honestly, anything at all, you can count on us. She looked at him and smiled. I don't need saving, Rex, but it's good to know someone else finally learned how. Those words left a deep silence in the room again, not the kind filled with tension, but the kind filled with understanding. As she turned to leave, everyone in the bar stood up without thinking, like soldiers standing for a salute. Rex didn't stop her this time. He just watched her walk out, the eagle tattoo hidden under her jacket but still burning in everyone's mind. When the door closed behind her, he looked around at his men. We don't mock people anymore, he said firmly. Not here. Not ever again. No one argued. They all nodded quietly. Something inside them had changed. Something deep. Outside, the night air was cool and soft. Emily started her motorcycle, the engine roaring to life. As she rode off into the darkness, she didn't look back. She didn't need to. The silence she left behind was her victory, the kind of silence that comes when people finally understand what true strength looks like. And for the first time in years, Rex felt peace. Not fear, not pride, but peace. The woman he once tried to humiliate had become his teacher, and that lesson he knew would stay with him for the rest of his life. Days passed after that night, but the memory of Emily stayed with everyone in that small town. The bar that once echoed with loud laughter and fights now carried a different kind of energy. People spoke softly, listened more, and the cruel jokes were gone. Even Rex, the man who once ruled the bar with fear, had changed completely. Every morning, he rode his bike to the old bridge outside town, the same one Emily had crossed when she first arrived. He'd stand there quietly, watching the river flow beneath him, thinking about her words. Real strength is quiet, she had said. Those words repeated in his mind like a heartbeat. One morning, as the sun rose golden over the hills, Rex saw a small group of young bikers speeding across the bridge. They were loud, reckless, and laughing the same way he and his crew used to. For a moment, he felt a strange twist inside, a mix of anger and recognition. He saw his old self in them. The boys stopped at the bar later that evening. Their jackets had the same kind of rough symbols, and their voices filled the place with the same arrogance Rex once carried. The bartender looked uneasy, afraid that things might turn ugly again. Rex stood up slowly and walked toward them. The tallest one, a young man with wild eyes and a loud laugh, noticed him and smirked. What's up, old man? You used to run this joint, right? Heard you were a legend. Rex looked at him calmly. I used to be, he said, but not the kind of legend you want to be. The boy frowned. What's that supposed to mean? Rex sighed. It means I thought fear made me powerful, but it only made me small. The group laughed, not taking him seriously. Sounds like you went soft, another one said. Rex nodded slightly. Maybe. Or maybe I just learned what strength really means. The young man leaned forward, mocking. Oh yeah? And who taught you that? Your mommy. Rex looked him dead in the eye. A woman, he said quietly. A woman who wasn't afraid of me, even when I tried to break her. That made the room fall silent. Even the new bikers stopped laughing. Something about the calm in Rex's voice made them uneasy. The bartender finally spoke. He's talking about Emily, he said softly. The one with the eagle tattoo. One of the boys snorted. What's so special about a tattoo? Rex's eyes darkened. It's not the tattoo, he said. It's what it stands for. Courage. Loss. Survival. The boys exchanged glances, confused. Rex walked over to the bar counter, grabbed a stool and sat down. You think you're strong because people move out of your way, because you can scare someone into silence. But that's not strength. That's weakness pretending to be power. They didn't reply. The whole bar was listening again, just like that night when Emily's tattoo froze them all. Rex continued. Real strength is when you've been through hell, and you still choose to stand tall. When you've lost everything, but you still treat people with respect. The young leader shifted uncomfortably. You sound like some preacher, he muttered. Rex gave a faint smile. Maybe, but I've lived both sides, the angry one and the peaceful one. And I can tell you, peace feels stronger. For the first time, the boys didn't argue. Something in Rex's tone had changed the air. The bartender leaned in and poured Rex a drink. You sound like her, he said quietly. Rex smiled sadly. She's in my head now, he said. And that's not a bad thing. That night, when the new bikers left, they didn't make any trouble. They rode off quietly, their laughter replaced with thought. Rex watched them go and whispered to himself. She'd be proud. Later, he sat outside the bar under the soft glow of the streetlight. The night was calm, and the sound of crickets filled the air. For the first time, he felt peace not just in his mind, but in his heart. He realized that change wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about learning from it. He remembered how Emily had stood there, unafraid, even when surrounded by men who wanted to humiliate her. He remembered the way her voice had trembled, not from fear, but from holding back the weight of her memories. And he remembered that eagle tattoo, the symbol of all she had survived. Rex looked up at the stars. I get it now, he murmured. You weren't fighting me that night. You were teaching me. The wind blew softly, as if carrying her spirit through the air. For a moment, Rex imagined she was out there somewhere, helping someone else, saving someone else, leaving another place forever changed. A few days later, Rex decided to do something he'd never done before. He walked into a local community center, where a group of young bikers met every weekend. They practiced stunts, fixed bikes, and talked about racing. But many of them were lost, just like he had been once. He stood before them awkwardly, unsure what to say. One of them asked, You the guy who used to run Iron Horse Bar? Rex nodded. Used to, he said. But I'm not that man anymore. Then he told them the story, everything. The night he tried to humiliate Emily, how her tattoo changed everything, and how her courage broke his pride. He spoke in plain, honest words, not to impress them but to make them understand. When he finished, the room was silent. Then one boy raised his hand shyly and said, So, what happened to her? Rex smiled faintly. She moved on. She didn't stay to be thanked. That's the thing about real heroes. They don't wait for applause. From that day forward, the young riders started calling Rex Old Eagle. It began as a joke, but it soon turned into respect. He never took credit for changing the bar or the town. He always said the same thing. It wasn't me. It was her. At night, when he rode his motorcycle through the empty streets, he felt like he could still hear her voice in the wind. Strong, calm, and unbroken. The lesson she left behind had spread quietly, from one person to another, like ripples in water. Emily's story had become a legend. Not the loud kind, but the kind that lived in people's hearts. And Rex knew that somewhere out there, she was still riding, still helping, still carrying that eagle with her. Not as a symbol of pain anymore, but of hope. Months had passed since that night when Emily last visited the town. The air had changed, calmer, warmer, like the storm had finally moved away. The bar that once smelled of anger and cheap whiskey now had a quiet hum of laughter and music. People talked kindly, helped each other, and the darkness that once lived in their eyes had faded. But Rex still thought of her. Every single day. Sometimes, while fixing his motorcycle, he'd stop for a moment and remember her steady voice, her brave eyes, and that eagle tattoo that had silenced an entire room of men. He often wondered where she was now. Was she safe? Was she still riding alone through unknown roads? Or had she finally found a place where she could rest? One late evening, when the sun was melting into the horizon, Rex was closing the bar. The last customer had just left. He turned off the lights, but before locking the door, he heard the sound of a motorcycle outside. Smooth, powerful, familiar. His heart skipped. He walked out slowly. Under the orange sky, a figure stood beside a bike, helmet still on. The bike was black and silver, exactly like Emily's. The rider removed the helmet, and for a second, Rex couldn't breathe. It was her. Emily looked the same, strong, calm, with a quiet fire in her eyes. She smiled faintly. "Still keeping the place peaceful?" she asked. Rex smiled back. "Trying to, though it's easier when people remember you." She laughed softly. "I didn't come here to be remembered." He nodded. "I know. But you were." They sat outside the bar, on the same wooden bench where Rex used to sit alone. The evening breeze brushed past them. Neither spoke for a while. Then Emily said, "You look different, Rex. Lighter." He chuckled. "Guess I dropped some of that anger you saw in me." "That's good," she said gently. "Anger is heavy. It slows you down." Rex looked at her, serious now. "You were right, Emily, about everything. I thought strength came from fear, but it comes from control, from knowing who you are." She nodded slowly. "You learned the hard way, but you learned." He looked down at his hands. "I wish I could have told you sooner. I wish I hadn't done what I did." Emily's voice softened. "You don't need to wish, Rex. You already changed. That's what matters." They sat in silence again. The night was calm, the street empty except for the faint hum of crickets. Then Emily looked up at the stars. "You know," she said quietly, "I didn't think I'd ever come back here, but something told me I should." Rex looked at her curiously. "Why?" She hesitated, her eyes reflecting the night sky. "Because I wanted to see if people can really change. I've seen too many who never do." He smiled. "Well, I'm living proof." She smiled too. "You are." He turned to her. "Where have you been all this time?" "Everywhere," she said. "Different towns. Helping people where I can. Fixing bikes, training young riders, sometimes just listening to their stories. Everyone's fighting something, Rex. Some people fight others. Some fight themselves." He nodded. "You fought both, didn't you?" Her eyes darkened slightly. "Yeah," she whispered. "I did." Rex leaned back. "You still carry that eagle?" She gave a small smile. "Always. It's part of me. Some days it hurts to see it. Other days it gives me strength." He looked at her arm. The tattoo was faded but still beautiful. Wings wide, claws ready, full of meaning. Under the streetlight, it looked alive again. Rex said quietly, "That tattoo changed everything here. People started thinking before they acted. That's something I never thought I'd see." Emily looked surprised. "Really?" "Yeah," Rex said. "You didn't just change me, Emily. You changed this town. People learned respect. The bar isn't what it used to be. You started something that didn't stop when you left." For a moment, Emily looked emotional. "That's all I ever wanted," she said softly. "For people to understand what strength really means." They sat there, watching the stars, the sound of distant motorcycles fading in the wind. Then Rex asked quietly, "You heading somewhere new?" Emily nodded. "Tomorrow morning. There's a small town up north. I heard there's a group of kids there getting into trouble. Thought maybe I could help before they end up like you used to be." Rex smiled. "Then they're lucky," She smiled back. Maybe. Or maybe they just need someone to remind them who they are. Rex hesitated for a moment, then said, "You know, we could use someone like you here too. The young writers look up to me now, but they need more than my words. They need someone who's lived it." Emily looked thoughtful. "Maybe one day," she said. "But right now, I still have roads to travel." He nodded. "Then just promise you'll come back." She laughed softly. "I don't make promises I can't keep. But maybe the wind will bring me back." She stood up, put her helmet on, and started her bike. The engine roared gently, breaking the stillness of the night. Rex stood too, watching her. Before riding off, she looked at him one last time. "You saved yourself, Rex," she said. "That's the hardest thing anyone can do." Then she revved the bike and took off into the darkness, the sound fading into the distance. Rex watched until the light disappeared. For a long time he stood there, the wind brushing against his face. He whispered to himself, "No, Emily, you saved me." The night grew quiet again. The stars shone brighter. And in that silence, Rex felt something deep inside him. A peace he had never known before. He knew that Emily might never return, but her presence would always remain. She had left a mark on the town, on the people, and most of all, on his soul. From that night on, Rex made it his mission to continue what she had started. He began teaching young writers about discipline, respect, and courage. He told them her story, about the woman who faced a bar full of men and stood her ground, about the tattoo that spoke louder than words, and about how true power comes from compassion, not cruelty. And every time he finished the story, he'd look at the sky and smile, knowing that somewhere out there, Emily was still riding. The wind her companion, the road her home, and the eagle her eternal strength. A few months later, the town had completely changed. What was once a rough and noisy place had become calm, almost peaceful. The bar that used to echo with fights and curses was now filled with friendly faces and soft laughter. A picture of an eagle, hand-painted on a wooden board, now hung above the bar counter. A silent tribute to the woman who had changed everything. Rex came in early every morning, cleaning tables, fixing chairs, and making sure everything stayed in order. He wasn't the same man anymore. The anger that once ruled his heart was gone. People greeted him with respect, not fear. The younger writers, who once looked up to him for his wildness, now followed his advice with admiration. They called him Old Eagle, a name that made him smile every time he heard it. But even with all the change, one thing never left his mind: Emily. He often wondered where she was. Sometimes he would dream of her riding through mountains or crossing long empty roads, her hair flying in the wind, her eyes full of determination. She had become a legend in his heart, real but unreachable. One cold evening, as the sun disappeared behind the hills, Rex was sitting outside the bar. The wind carried the smell of rain. He looked up at the wooden eagle sign and smiled softly. Just then, a car stopped nearby. A young man stepped out, holding a small envelope in his hand. "Are you Rex?" the man asked. Rex nodded. "Yeah, that's me." The man smiled faintly. "Someone asked me to give this to you. Said you'd understand." Rex's heart jumped. "Who?" "She didn't give her name," the man said. "But she had a tattoo. An eagle." Rex froze. His hands trembled slightly as he took the envelope. "Thank you," he whispered. The man nodded, smiled, and left. Rex stared at the envelope for a long moment before opening it carefully. Inside, there was a single folded letter and a small photograph. The photo showed Emily standing beside her bike, somewhere on a mountain road, the eagle tattoo visible on her arm. She looked peaceful, smiling at the camera. Rex unfolded the letter. It was written in simple handwriting, strong but graceful, just like her voice. "Rex, if you're reading this, it means I've moved on again. Not because I'm running, but because the world still has too many places that need healing. I came back once to see if change was possible. You proved that it is. You became what I always hoped people would, strong, kind, and brave enough to face their past. I can't tell you where I'm going next, but know this: the road ahead isn't just mine. It belongs to everyone who chooses peace over pride. You don't owe me anything, Rex. But if you want to honor what happened that night, then keep doing what you're doing. Teach them respect. Teach them control. Teach them that scars can be stories of strength, not shame. And if you ever find someone lost, someone angry like you once were, don't judge them. Guide them. The eagle on my arm isn't just a reminder of the people I lost. It's a reminder of those I helped find themselves again. You're one of them, Rex. Never forget that. Ride free, Emily. Rex read the letter again and again, his eyes wet with emotion. He could almost hear her voice in the words, calm and steady, full of strength. For a long time, he sat there in silence, the sound of rain beginning to fall softly around him. He looked up at the eagle sign above the bar. The rain made it shine under the dim light. Slowly, he stood up, folded the letter carefully, and placed it inside his jacket, close to his heart. That night, he didn't open the bar. Instead, he got on his motorcycle and rode out into the rain. The cold wind hit his face, but he didn't care. The road stretched ahead endlessly, glowing faintly under the headlights. Every drop of rain felt like a memory of mistakes, forgiveness, and the courage that changed him forever. As he rode past the bridge where Emily once crossed, he slowed down. The river below was roaring from the rain, and the wind howled through the trees. He stopped his bike for a moment, took out the letter, and whispered, "You didn't just save me, Emily. You saved this whole town." He folded the letter again and kept it safe. Then, with a deep breath, he looked at the dark road ahead and smiled. "Time to keep your promise," he said softly. He started the engine again, and the roar of the motorcycle echoed through the valley. The rain poured harder, but Rex felt light, free in a way he had never felt before. He wasn't chasing anything anymore. He was living the lesson she had taught him. Back in town, people noticed something different the next morning. The bar was quiet, the sign still dripping from the rain. On the counter, a note was left behind. It read, "Gone riding. Keep the peace alive. Old Eagle." From that day on, Rex became a traveler just like Emily. He visited small towns, met lost souls, and helped them find their way. Wherever he went, he told her story, the story of the woman who faced fear with courage and taught others to do the same. People began to talk about her everywhere. The Eagle Woman, the rider who could silence violence with nothing but her strength and kindness. Years later, a new legend began to form, about two riders who never stayed in one place, who helped people heal wherever they went. Some said they were still out there, riding under the same sky, watching over those who had lost their way. And sometimes, when the wind was strong and the road was empty, people swore they could hear the faint sound of two motorcycles in the distance. One leading, one following, like a teacher and her student, still riding together through the endless night. Because some lessons don't end, some stories never fade, and some eagles never stop flying.